What's going on, everybody, and welcome back. So this video is actually going to be unique in a way that I'm not going to be working on the car, but I'm just going to sort of give you guys a rundown on exactly what it took to turbo my car, the money that I spent on parts, and I can put links in the description to everything if you guys want to go the same route, or you can definitely do a lot of different things. So I broke it up into some essential stuff and also into some optional stuff as well. So I'll show you guys all that. I'll do a breakdown of everything and try to explain everything as best I can and what I've picked up and learned doing this build on my car. Because my car is exclusively built by myself, tuned by myself, and everything I've done except resurface my cylinder head. But that was in the engine building process, which I can tell you about too. So the story with this car is I bought it maybe 10 months ago now, and the car had like severe oil leaks and like really bad timing belt was about to snap, and the clutch was bad. I mean, it was in rough shape and there's hardly any paint on the car. So I was just took it on as a project car, and yeah, so I've been having a good time with it, and in this amount of time I've got it where I wanted it. So first I redid the cylinder head, which I lapped all the valves, and I went through the entire thing and tried to make it so that it would run really good, get it ready to be turboed, new head gasket, resurface the head and everything, and put it back together, and it burned oil like crazy, like so bad. Anytime I got a past like 4,000 RPMs, it would just smoke like an insane amount of smoke. And so I was super distraught. For like a month I drove it like that, just hoping it would stop. I tried all sorts of different things to unstick piston rings and all that stuff. Nothing worked. So realized that I was dumb and I should have just rebuilt the bottom end while I was in there anyway with the head off. But I learned my lesson, just rebuilt the whole thing. I took it out, and that gave me the chance to paint the engine bay, paint up the motor and trans just like I wanted to, all that good stuff. So I'm really enjoying all that stuff. It looks really nice. I'll show you guys what it looks like here. But yeah, it's been quite the process getting it to what it is now. It's been definitely a lot of hard work, but it's definitely not unachievable. I mean, I set up a goal for myself to try to get this car where I wanted it in like a reasonable amount of time, and I think that me having a full-time job and everything, it's not too bad that I was able to achieve this in relatively 10 months. It took me a while to get it registered and everything. But I'm currently doing the body work on it right now. You can see my fenders all primed. I'm deleting the body side moldings. If this is your first time watching one of my videos, hopefully you guys enjoy. I know I haven't shown the engine bay of this thing in a while because I've been doing all this body work, but yeah, it does look pretty nice in here. Everything's pretty clean. It's getting a little dusty from the body work, but yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and clean this up in here soon. So without further ado, we'll go over the list right here. So this is the list that I made. First I'll run through all the essential stuff. So obviously you got the turbo for $220. I chose to get a CX Racing turbo, which I've heard decent things about. They're not insanely expensive. So $220 for a turbo is like very cheap on eBay, but like I went with like an eBay name brand. So you're better off going with like a name brand turbo on eBay rather than just some unbranded thing, because you're not really sure what you're going to get there. But with this, at least I knew I was getting a CX Racing. It says it came balanced, it says it was good. I'll post a link to it. I think it's a 60, 63, so it's got a 60 on the cold side, and then the hot side is a 63, because this is a little bit bigger motor, being that it's a 2.2 liter. It's an F22 B2. Which means the V2 is a non-VTEC. So that's what this motor is. So it's a little bit larger displacement than say a B16 or a B18 or a B20. So we've got exhaust system I did when I first got the car, really. That was 163. That's like semi-optional. If you really wanted to minimize that, you could just cut a hole in the hood and hood dump it. But I didn't really want that set up for myself. Turbo manifold, $62. My turbo manifold on this car, realistically, I wish I got a different one, because I would prefer that the turbo flange actually be offset to the left side. If anything, mine's kind of offset to the right. So what that does is it pushes the turbo and the downpipe like really close to my alternator, because that's just kind of the way you have to clock the turbos on these cars, unless I deleted the alternator or unless I got like a top mount which came up underneath and the turbo mounted on top, which obviously looks cooler, but cast manifolds are super cheap. These log manifolds right here, they don't really crack. You know, if you buy a cheap eBay one that's welded together, chances are it's going to crack over time. These log ones don't crack. They make good power. I know tons of people have made, you know, even 400 horsepower on a log manifold. So I don't really see too much of a reason, unless I do get into welding and can make one myself. I'll make a nice log one too. Honestly, I don't even care. Works good, you know, it doesn't look the best, but it works. And that's really the only option for this car because it's kind of tough. So now we're looking at turbo, drain, and feed lines. So obviously your turbo needs oil, so you have to give it oil with a feed line, and that's going to need a restrictor, and that's going to depend on the type of turbo that you have. If you have a ball bearing turbo, which are, you know, a better turbo, a ball bearing turbo is better. It'll spin more freely rather than a journal bearing turbo. I have a journal bearing, it's very cheap, but the clearances are a little bit looser in a journal bearing turbo, so you kind of want more oil. So you want the larger restrictor size. I mean, you guys can look it up. I'm not really sure exactly what the right size is. I don't want to mislead you, but just know that you need a restrictor, because if you send it full oil pressure, you can blow out your seals in your turbo. Maybe some people have run without oil restrictors and been fine, you know, maybe, I don't know, but I was told to run one and mine's running good. The turbo doesn't smoke, so it's not getting too much oil, and it hasn't locked up yet, and I definitely put, like, you know, 1,500 miles on it, or at least maybe 2,000 miles on it. Not too many, but it's doing all right. So you're also going to need the drain line, which you want to do a 10 AN line for the drain line, and you want to make sure that you have it running down to your pan and no kinks in it, and you want to make sure that it runs down the whole way. So you don't really want it to go up or go flat at any point, because that way you could actually have issues getting rid of the oil out of the turbo, and you know, you want it to flow freely right back into the oil pan. So you want to make sure it's all downhill the whole way, and that's no restrictor, it just drains out by gravity. And then you need a sandwich plate so you can actually tap into an oil supply to give your feed line some oil, so that will go to your turbo, and that's $30. Wastegate, I went with a cheap eBay wastegate, and I have a video on disassembling it to make sure it actually works. Mine came out okay. Sometimes the diaphragms are pinched, but you know, you just kind of got to check it out, and if it's bad, I mean, maybe file a return or something. I do want to mention that most everything was bought on eBay. A couple of things on Amazon, but most of this stuff right here was bought on eBay. So I basically built this whole car with eBay parts. So some people are gonna say, oh, that's garbage, you know, that sucks. Well, you know what? It runs good, at least for now. You know, maybe long-term wise, it won't. But, you know, I thrashed the car. I beat the crap out of it every time I drive it, and it's still running great. So, I mean, until it fails, and we'll see what ends up failing, I mean, I have, you know, a lot of good things to say about all these parts. So, yeah, cheap eBay wastegate, and then dump piping and stuff like that. I mean, if you guys are going to weld this yourself, then it's cheap. You know, you just buy pipes. If you're going to have it welded, that's more cost you got to factor in. Blow-off valve, I got a cheap knockoff, the SSQV. It's a sequential style blow-off valve, the HKS, that's what it is. So it's a knockoff HKS, $32. Flange for it that goes into your intercooler piping is $15. That I can actually show you guys over here. So this guy right here, this blow-off valve, this is the fake HKS. Comes with you know, the little ring down here, the snap ring, and a seal. So you got to hook that up to a vacuum source. I learned that the hard way. I rocked it without being hooked up for a while until I realized I needed a vacuum source. We're good to go with that now. So yeah, then this flange I also got separately because that doesn't come with the intercooler pipe. That was pretty cheap, but yeah, so the flange and then intercooler piping kit, which mine came with the intercooler and piping, which is $119. And then I had some miscellaneous couplers like that 90 degree that comes right off the turbo. It goes, I think it goes 2" to 2.5 because it's 2.5" intercooler piping. So 2 to 2.5 or something of that nature. So I had to get that, and that's random couplers. And then injectors, I have a video on decapping GM stock truck injectors, and that was $15 from the junkyard. I bought 4 of them, decapped them, so now they flow around 800 cc's, and I worked that into my tune, so I was able to use those. You're also going to need a tunable ECU. So OBD1 chip computer, for which you can get a chip burner and burn chips if you want to do it that way. I didn't really like the idea of plugging chips in and out of my ECU all the time, so I decided to go with Chrome. And I'm not gonna help you guys or anything like that, but there's ways to get Chrome without paying for it. You know, just do some digging. It's not the best program, honestly, so it's, if you guys want to use it, fine, but it's kind of crappy. So I'm gonna try to switch to Honda at some point, but it's quite expensive. It's like $600 for like a S300. I don't really see them used too much around here. But yeah, so I chose to go with the tunable ECU, the OBD1 chipped for Chrome. So I went ahead and bought a Moates Ostrich. That was $175, and I bought the Hulog for data logging. So that allows me to hook my laptop up to the ECU with just a ribbon cable. So that's pretty cool. That's how I actually tune the car. And you're also going to want to get a fuel pump. I ended up getting a Walbro 255. That was $80, and you got to kind of retrofit it to your tank. And then you're also going to need some sort of catch can setup. So I used AN10 lines for my catch can. I have 2 lines. I'll show you guys that. So the can was $40. Fittings, miscellaneous fittings were like $20, and the lines were actually $47. So I'll show you guys the catch can setup, which was absolutely required because this car is pretty old and has loose clearances with 200,000 miles. All I did was hone the crap out of the cylinders and throw new rings on there. So the piston and wall is probably pretty loose, so we have a good amount of blow by. So this catch can setup right here, these 2 lines lead over into this catch can right back here, and that's vented to the atmosphere. So any pressure that builds in the crankcase gets vented immediately. So that's nice to have. We don't blow out any seals or anything like that. My dipstick doesn't blow out. So that's definitely, I think it's a must for this car in particular. But you guys, maybe you don't need it. Maybe you don't mind. But yeah, you could also vent it into your crankcase, but I didn't want to do that. So, or rather vent it into your intake, sorry. So then we come into the optional stuff. I haven't yet totaled this stuff up yet. I'll get a total for you guys and then I'll throw it in the next clip. But I don't really want to know the total, honestly, but I think it would be interesting to find out how much I spent on it, because a lot of people want to go with a kit, and you want to just buy a kit. Okay, so my compressor turned on, and then somebody showed up at my house, and it's now dark. So anyway, the point is, I don't know what the point is. I don't remember what I was talking about. But that's what it was. A lot of people want to go with a kit on eBay, and it says it has everything that you need, but in a lot of those kits, stuff shows up broken. I mean, you can buy a kit certainly and work from that, but there's just stuff that you're going to need, such as like tunable ECU and injectors and fuel pump and all kinds of stuff like that you're just not going to get from that kit. And, chances are you're going to need to buy additional stuff. So those kits aren't everything you truly need. And then it comes to the actual other stuff that's optional. And I'll go over the optional stuff now. But basically, you're going to want gauges in the car, especially if you're tuning it yourself. And if you just want to keep a general eye on everything, gauges are great. So I have 3 gauges that I added to the car. One's the boost gauge, and one is an oil pressure gauge. Those came together. Those are glow shift gauges, 124 for the 2 of them. And then I have an air fuel ratio gauge, and I welded a bung into my exhaust off my turbo and put the sensor there. So it comes with the sensor and the gauge, and that was 170, and that's AEM. So that's a really nice gauge, because I really care about the air fuels. It's very important. Oil pressure, I just want to know that I have it and that it's good. Boost, relatively accurate is good enough. As long as the gauge reads the same as the ECU reads and, the map sensor, and it does. So that's all fine and good. So all that stuff there. Boost controller, I have just like a knockoff Turbo Smart boost controller, $35, just so I can turn it up from the 7-pound spring. T-fitting for the oil pressure gauge as well, because you need to tee off your oil pressure. You could use the sandwich plate if you want to, but I used a T. I hear stainless steel is better than brass, because brass tends to break after vibrating for a long time, so hopefully that doesn't happen to me. But if my gauge pegs to 0, then I know that I'm spraying oil everywhere, so it's a good idea, I guess, to keep an eye on it. So another reason why you'd want an oil pressure gauge. ARP Head Studs. I did take this motor apart and install ARP head studs, and then I took it apart again and reinstalled it with the same head studs, torqued them down again, 90 foot-pounds. So those studs were 160, but they get the extra clamping force on the head gasket. And I didn't write it here, but I use Honda multi-layer steel head gaskets, OEM Honda head gaskets from Honda. So I think that's probably the best thing you can use. I mean, unless you have like a radical setup, you know, that's probably the best thing that you want to use. The multi-layer steel are the best ones. And I didn't have my block decked. You could, but I'm having no problems sealing with a head gasket. I have no blow-by into the overflow tank, or you know, no coolant leak, you know, getting blown out of the radiator into the overflow. Like, this thing's super solid, not pushing coolant anywhere. And the head really was messed up. If you want to see something messed up, you could check out some of my previous videos. Like, this thing is messed up. The head is all corroded inside and everything, like where the surface meets. But it's not necessarily on the sealing portions. It's just in like the water jacket areas of the head. It's pretty nuts, but you can see a video of it. But the machine shop that I took it to said they think it'll be fine. So, and it has been. It's been fine. So I didn't spend any money to buy a new cylinder head or anything like that, and I thought about it, but I didn't end up doing it. So I'm glad I didn't, because mine's running great. So yeah, other than the head studs, I got motor mount inserts. I mean, you could get like really billet inserts or whatever, but these Prothane bushing inserts that I got to insert into the front and rear motor mounts, wow. That is a loud helicopter. Okay, anyway, these inserts that I got for the motor mounts, they're so nice because they make it so the motor barely moves. Like, I can tell how much more vibration is actually translated into the car from the drivetrain. Like, when I take off somewhere and there's like a little bit of clutch chatter, the whole car shakes because it's just so much more connected to the motor. Or if it's bucking and jerking, I definitely feel it, you know, on every single occasion. But other optional stuff is the heat wrap for the exhaust, which is $15, and then the turbo blanket, which is $25. You may not need that. In my particular case, I did because it's super close to my alternator, and I wanted to make sure that the exhaust didn't heat up the alternator too bad. So I ended up heat wrapping the whole downpipe, and I put on the turbo blanket just to try to keep the temps down in the engine bay in there, just because, you know, my intake is really close to the turbo. And that's another thing I plan to do, is move the intake. That's something I didn't include in here too, and that just goes to show there's a lot of stuff that I may have not mentioned or may have forgotten, and there's little stuff along the way that you guys are gonna find that is gonna, you know, oh crap, I gotta order this part now and I don't have it, and I gotta wait another week just because I forgot something. And you're gonna forget stuff, and you're gonna run into roadblocks and stuff like that, but you know, eventually you'll get it. And so these totals here that I have at the bottom, you probably just saw them in this clip, but $1,400 basically for all the basic stuff that it actually took to turbo the car. And that's all the basic stuff, you know, $1,400. And then optional stuff right here that I added on, which a lot of it is not that much money. The gauges are a little expensive, but they're good to have. $555 for that. So all in all, just under the $2,000 mark. And the car was about $1,000, so we're right in around $3,000 in this car for the turbo setup and the car itself. And honestly, it's a lot of fun for that kind of money. Like, you can go out and you can buy something that's new, you know, or not new, right? You buy something for $3,000, you know, you just, any sort of performance car, and you're not going to have this much fun. You know, it's a lot. You have to spend a lot more than $3,000 to get something that's this fun. So all in all, it's a pretty budget, fun car. And, you know, I have other money into the car other than this, but this is all the stuff that's related to the turbo. So I'll make other videos about the other stuff that I have involved in the car. But yeah, for now, hopefully you guys enjoyed. And I'm thinking if I can take the car out, maybe I'll do a couple of pulls and I'll throw some of those in here for you guys. for a turbo car setup. Not too bad in my opinion. You know, obviously the gauges and everything cost the extra money, but it's worth it, you know. Especially if you're going to tune it yourself, you need this stuff. But it's great to just watch it too, you know. You can see exactly what everything's doing. Hopefully you guys can hear me, and hopefully the drone's not too bad. But it's definitely really loud in here, especially since I have the rear seat folded. But yeah, thanks for watching everybody, and hopefully you enjoyed. And definitely ask any questions you would like to in the comments. I'm more than willing to answer any questions regarding to helping you guys out. So thanks a lot, and peace out.